budget process. We are all familiar with the famous briefcase. When you see the CS walking out of the Treasury with that briefcase, we've always had our hopes high. I think that's the only other time when the country is united. Seeing the CS, I don't know whether this time it will be a limousine to the Parliamentary, but we wait to see. So we are going to look at the budget process, and any questions that you have, you can pass them to us through our SMS line 20316. You can also engage with us on our WhatsApp line 0786 316 316. We are also live on our social media platforms, including our YouTube page. So engage with us and let's see what exactly the National Treasury and Economic Planning has for us in the next financial year. Joining me in this conversation, I am so pleased to welcome the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury and Economic Planning, FCPA, Honorable CS John Mbadi. Welcome, sir.
Thank you once more.
We are also pleased to be joined by a distinguished panel of audience, directors from the National Treasury. For the very first time, you are seeing their faces, some of them in our national television. Applause to you guys. It takes courage to come out, and thank you for supporting the CS. We also have different economic and policy analysts and students from the University of Nairobi joining us to be part of this conversation. We have to bring everyone on board. We don't want to see another Gen Z movement for the next financial bill. By the way, do we have to have finance bill for every financial year?
We'll address us. Or you want me to address it now?
All that thought, we are coming back.
Okay.
We start now. Crosstalk begins. Thank you so much, CS. We need to start by the aspect of budget process, just understanding it for the very first time, because most of the times we just see supplementary budgets being read in the National Assemblies. We see the CS going to the National Assembly and reading out the budget, but the appreciation and the idea behind the process making, how is that?
Thank you, JP, and I'm happy that you have noted that there are some faces behind these budgets that people don't see quite often. In fact, people don't know that those numbers, who puts them together is this gentleman you see here in front of you. Anyona is known as the budget man. But I don't want to incite public against you. His role is limited to coordinating the figures. He's not the one who generates them. So don't kill Anyona when you meet him in town. That is the one denying you road in your area. He is here with Musa Kadanji. These are people who are crunching the figures. Now, budget process. JP, people think or imagine that budget starts somewhere around April, March, or February when they first see the budget policy statements, April when we submit the budget estimates. More particularly, people wait for a budget day, which comes in June, and they think that is the time when budgets are made. Budget is a very elaborate process. It starts immediately. A financial year begins. In fact, by August, the law requires the Constitution, Article 220, as read together with Section 35 of the PFM Act, requires that the Cabinet Secretary issues guidelines to all MDAs on the preparation of the budget. So all the MDAs where the Treasury is supposed to be coordinating their budget, because we have three budgets, national government budgets. One is the executive budget, two is the parliament budgets or legislature budgets, and then we have the judiciary budget. Now, the judiciary budget and the budget for parliament are never put together or sent to the Treasury. They just inform us, but they send it to Parliament for consideration, National Assembly to be specific. But the executive budget, which is covering all ministries, departments, and agencies, are submitted to Parliament. And that begins in August, when we issue those guidelines. We tell them this is the framework, how we want the budget to be prepared. And for this year, we gave instruction that the budget should be prepared on the basis of zero-based budgets, which simply means that we are like starting from zero, that you justify every expenditure. It's not incremental budget, which we have had over the years, where MDAs just indicate that last financial year we were given 50 billion. This year, put a markup of 10%, we want 55 or we want 60 billion. We are saying we are starting from the scratch. You justify all the programs that you want to implement in the year from zero, and then the budget will be allocated on the basis of that. So that is the starting point, the guidelines. Then it comes to September. And in September, you get a very key document which many people are not giving much attention to. That is the Budget Review and Outlook paper, otherwise known as BROP. Now that document is very critical because first, it gives a reflection of how the previous financial year performed. You analyze, because the previous financial year, you had projected some revenue collection, you had projected to spend on specific programs, and then the year has ended. So you must account to yourself and account to the Kenyan public, how did we perform? So that is seen in that Outlook paper, that this is how the country did in the previous year. And then it also helps you to focus ahead, look at the business environment, look at the situation as it is. You see, like last year, you saw what we went through, the Gen Z moment, the civil unrest, economic activities were affected, especially in the first 3 months when there was almost total shutdown of the economy. Then that affected economic activities. But we are looking ahead. So you assess the environment going forward. Are we likely to have rains? Is there going to be El Nino or La Nina? Or what are the implications it would have? What are some of the changing and political environment, the changes in the political environment, including geopolitical environment, where you see we have some declarations and policies. So this you will find in the Budget Review and Outlook paper. But as the name suggests, you review and you look at the outlook. So then you determine where you are. Then that now informs you into projecting with good clarity on the coming financial year. Now that will now take you to the budget policy statement. Budget policy statement, as the name suggests, is basically a policy direction of the government. So the government, any government in the world has some policies informed by maybe a national policy developed over a period of time, but there are also manifestos of political parties which become policy, maybe short-term and medium-term policies. And then you also have certain aspects of human life which any government must just implement certain priority areas. So in the budget policy statement, you must address, like in Kenya we have the Vision 2030. We are now on MTEF 4, yeah, which is the final one. So you must look at what was it that we are supposed to achieve under Vision 2030. Then the government which is in power, Kenya Kwanza government, it has changed. We thought it was UDA, became Kenya Kwanza, now broad-based. I hope it will end here until 2027. But the government is in power, led by the president. Yeah, this government came into office having made some promises. Those promises now have to be put into government policies. And if you look at the government policies that we have right now, or the agenda of the government, it is anchored on what is called the better principle, with pillars. Yeah, we have the agricultural pillar that talks about agricultural transformation, and within it is where you have food security, elimination or eradication of hunger. Within that, you also have the housing, affordable housing, is actualizing that housing pillar. You have the health, that is universal health coverage, primary health cover. You have what we call emergency, chronic, and critical illness. That is also part of that to actualize that cover. Then we have the facility improvement as a requirement, because we have had health facilities across the country which have not been attended to for so many years. That is a component of this universal coverage. You know, when I hear people talk about SHA, and to me, I think we are just concentrating on a very narrow aspect of it. It's a very wide agenda of the government and policy. So that is health. Then you come to the other one of digital, superhighway, and inclusive economy. That is very wide. You see, the whole world is going digital. If you are left behind in the digital space, then you will be left behind forever. But it is also important to think about inclusive economy, which many of us have not been talking about. Economy can grow and thrive, and yet there are paupers and there are people who are living and languishing in poverty. We need for the country to develop and move forward and to avoid social unrest and social instability. Economic growth must be inclusive. And then there is also the employment. So all these pillars, all that will be mirrored and captured in the budget policy statement. Besides that, you must now project revenue that you are going to collect and project expenditure. Those are those form part and parcel of the budget policy statement. And it addresses the previous year as well, talks about the changes in the environment, political environment. Even what is happening in the US affects us here. We have to project to talk about the world economy. We must look at the emerging economies. We must look at the sub-Saharan African economies, and all that form part of the BPS. Then, after the BPS, of course, now we have to generate the budget estimates. But generation of budget estimate is a process. You know, some people think we sit at the Treasury and start allocating figures, that now education take this much, health take this much, water. No. We have sector working groups. We have ministries grouped, MDAs grouped into sectors. What we do at the Treasury level is to tell them this is the envelope that we have. This envelope, we must divide it or disaggregate it into smaller envelopes. So we give one sector and their small envelope, another sector, their small envelope. Then these sectors now sit and engage even in public participation to get views. And then from there, they now go into suggesting how to allocate resources. So our work, and that is why I said, people should not kill Anyona. His is just put these figures now together and then maybe factor in some national concerns. Because if you look at Article 203 of the Constitution, there is a criteria that we must follow in allocating resources. There is national interests, public debt. Those are things that we must. Marginalization, by the way. When sometimes I talk about certain areas are marginalized, people think I'm just speaking crazy things or speaking from my mind. It is a constitutional requirement that development must be inclusive, that you must attend specifically to marginalized areas. So that must be seen in the budget. And finally, that process, once we submit all those documents, by the way, BPS must go to Parliament, National Parliament actually, 15th of December, February latest. Then budget estimates must go to National Assembly latest 30th April. Then now Parliament will now deal with these documents. They also go through public participation and pass them. But they must be passed before 30th of June. That is the law, including Appropriation Act. The only other thing that I want to mention is that in the month of June, on a date determined by agreement between me and my colleagues in the East African region. And by the way, we were in Uganda the other day, and I suggested to them that we read our budgets on 12th of June, and they seem to have agreed. Actually, it was brought up by the minister from Tanzania, and I suggested 12th because we had shared with my team. 12th will be on a Thursday of June. But what are we reading on 12th? You know, what we are reading is policy highlights and budget and revenue raising measures. Those are the things that we are addressing that day. But remember, even before I carried that briefcase to Parliament,
which I've always thought money inside it.
Already the public will have any suggested revenue-raising measures will already be with the public in form of finance bill, which I think you asked, but maybe you'll ask later. Yeah. So that is the budget process. Then it is passed by 30th June. Parliament prepares appropriation bill, which becomes an act of Parliament. The President must assent to the bill by 30th of June. If he doesn't, then vote on account kicks in, where you are allowed to spend as you await presidential assent.
Okay.
And before, the vote on account used to be given even before the bill is passed. But that changed with the current constitution, and we have since affirmed that the vote on account can only be granted after the bill is passed, but before assent by the president. Should anything happen, the president takes time to assent to the bill, the appropriation bill, then now vote on account kicks in. In fact, nowadays it has become more or less irrelevant, because I have never seen where the president fails to assent before 30th of June. Okay. I think I've just given
a brief process of how that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know whether my team, do you want to say something?
I think as they do is in terms of, I think Mr. Nyona would be best fit in terms of how do we then balance the interests? How do you know that I need to give the Ministry of Agriculture this percentage, education to this, but also the marginalized communities plus counties? Because we've also seen quite a huge pending bills that we owe to the counties, and I think CS, you may need to answer to that as well. If these bills, are they fictitious, or these are just bills that have not been paid, and how then are we going to make sure that they are offset in the next financial year?
I will address the bill, but let Anyona and Musa go first. You can address the issues that he has raised further.
Thank you, CS. I just want to really say that in terms of the process, as mentioned by the CS, is something that takes 10 to 11 months. So when you see that budget, it has gone through a process that has taken 10 to 11 months. Now, how do you balance between the so many needs and the scarce resource envelope? And that is where the biggest really challenge is. Under normal circumstances, even at your household level, you would find that the needs and wants supersede your income. And then, of course, the challenge becomes, what do you take on board? You have to think of the needs first before you look at the wants, because needs are those basic services, basic goods that you need in order to thrive. As mentioned by the CS, government entities are classified into sector working groups. Okay? And one of the sector working groups that we have, which is very key, is the macro working group. The macro working group will determine, from the estimation of revenue and financing, what is available moving forward. So it determines the resource envelope. And the budget process that has been described here is top-bottom. Top, you define the resource envelope. From the bottom, you identify your priorities based on that resource envelope. So the sector working groups are put together, having appreciated the related functions of these entities that have been grouped together to deliver a particular objective of government. Now, resources are allocated to where functions are, to where those needs are, okay? For example, in Sector A, if you are now going to look at the requirement of PE, the salaries for the personnel in that particular sector, you will have to determine what is the number of staff in that particular, what is their pay. Then you compute that. What do they require for other basic needs like payment of rent if they are housed somewhere? What do they need for water? What do they need for electricity? What government priorities have been put in that particular sector? Okay. So in terms of then guidelines, you are looking at all these to determine the allocation, starting with the critical needs. Okay. In fact, you begin by determining what is non-discretionary in this particular sector and all other sectors before you begin to now decide on these other functions. So in short, the prioritization and allocation of resources is actually determined by the sector working groups. Okay. More often than not, obviously, what we receive as a National Treasury, even after, if I may share with you what we received in this supplementary in terms of additional request, it was almost 900 billion. 900 billion. Okay, so the appetite for spending is more compared to the resources that we raise. Thank you.
The appetite of spending and borrowing.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm still on the how do you balance?
Yes.
And just to supplement what CS said and what my colleague and Director Anyona said, there are very important stages in the budget making process which CS has alluded to. There is the first stage where guidelines are issued for people to begin to think about the outer year's budget, not the current year's budget, the outer year's budget. And that process begins when we have a document which CS has called Budget Review and Outlook Paper. Let me say that this is a very inclusive process because we do regard the Budget Review and Outlook Paper is prepared by what Anyona has called the macro working group. It's not prepared by Treasury alone. It's prepared by an interministerial, inter-agency group. And I will mention the institutions so that you see how inclusive this process is. We have the National Treasury, then we have the State Department of Economic Planning within the National Treasury. We have Central Bank of Kenya. We have Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. We have Kenya Revenue Authority. We have KIPRA, Kenya Institute of Public Policy and Research. And then we have Commission on Revenue Allocation. Those institutions by law form the macro working group, and we sit before September to prepare what we call the macroeconomic framework. And that macroeconomic framework is the one that guides the budget process going forward. I think Anyona alluded to the fact that this team or this group creates resources, or we end up with the resource ceilings. And these resource ceilings will come out of maybe the projections that we are doing. Each of these institutions have a macro model. We go through interactive process from each institution. What is your view about growth in the next year or this year? What is your view about revenues? KRA will give us their inputs. KIPRA will come with their analysis. Treasury will also give their analysis. It's a very, very inclusive process because that's the start of everything. And so we'll come up with that macroeconomic framework that is actually captured in the Budget Review and Outlook Paper. From there, Anyona alluded to the fact that ministries are clustered around sectors. Sectors would then meet and they will be given each sector their portion to, I think, was it saying the envelopes, to share, to now prioritize alongside what is it they are going to do. So that's the part I wanted to say, that we look at, you cannot have infinite resources. there is always limited resources. You know, in every budget, like Anyona said, you cannot have a free-for-all. And so look at revenues, look at the desired expenditure patterns, and also desired borrowing patterns, so that we still maintain our debt sustainability, even as we do the budget. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Because, you know, us, we are numbers people, and we can give you a lot of technical things which you may not remember. If you have to forget, please don't remember. If you have to forget, please remember that the budget process starts very early, about 10 months.
10 to 11 months, yeah.
If you have to forget, please don't forget that it is a consultative process, very involving, so it is not just done at the Treasury. If you have to forget, please don't forget that it is a process that takes a long time, and not only when you see me with a briefcase, that there is public participation in it. Please, you can take that home. The rest you can forget.
Let me ask Waziri before we get to the pending bills issue. What happens if then Parliament rejects or amends a section of your budget proposal? If you submit by 30th then of April, then they have to amend or reject it.
If you look at Article 221 and you read it all the way to 226, the budgets that we submit to Parliament are actually estimates. This is a presidential system. In a presidential system of government, so to speak, executive submits estimates, and those estimates are analyzed by governments. Actually, they are subjected to the budget committee. The Constitution talks about a committee of Parliament shall start the process of reviewing these estimates. So if they amend, that becomes the budget. If they reject, there will be no budget, and there can be government shutdown. So it must be a negotiated document in a presidential system. But remember, the only recourse in presidential system is that president participates also in budget legislation. And president participates in a budget process by assenting to the bill. So the president, if not satisfied, can veto.
Okay.
Yes.
So does it mean then who takes the lead of this process, the entire process? Is it the Parliament, is it the Treasury, or is it the executive in terms of the presidency?
Almost everybody takes the lead in budget process, but Treasury is at a unique position of coordinating the entire budget making process. As I said, it is the Treasury that gives guidelines on how budget should be prepared. In fact, in budget lines, which is even given to Parliament as well, and also to judiciary. Then all these are put together. There is that process that my two officers have elaborated so detailed and so eloquently. There is that process of consultation, getting sector working groups, getting the teams working together, putting together figures. We only give them indicative figures in terms of resource envelope. They bring the data to us, we put them together. But in the process of doing that, Kenyans are also involved by submitting their views and their opinions. And by the way, now we have even changed the model. You can see we have started going out. And none other than the Cabinet Secretary has been in the streets engaging Kenyans just to listen and hear from them. What are your priority areas? So that when we come to now put these figures together, we are also informed by the opinion of Kenyans. Then we submit them to Parliament. Then now once it goes to Parliament, Parliaments now take the leading role. Actually, National Assembly. We are now to their mercy, so to speak. They now look at those estimates, they can make amendments, they can make changes. They also listen to various ministries, MDAs, they make their submission and make final appeal and pitch, and then they pass. But they are required, by the law, by the way the law requires that any money bill, anything with money bill effect, you must get concurrence with the Treasury. That is where sometimes I find parliaments going off the mark a bit. They make amendments and adjustments without even reference to us. Even those amendments, they don't have to take our opinion, but they must again tell us that yes, we got your figures. The Ministry of Agriculture, you allocated this here, you put money for fertilizer, you had put money for seeds. But when we listened to the State Department, they have told us, no, remove some money from fertilizer and give it to animal vaccination, for example. Then we tell them, no, in fact, fertilizer, we need even much more. This was rational. So it is a negotiated process,
Okay.
But Parliament now finally passes the bill.
Okay.
And then it goes to the executive again, through the president, who takes the final responsibility. But there is something that I forgot to mention. All these documents can never go anywhere without Cabinet's approval. So there is that Cabinet approval, whether it is BPS, whether it is budget estimate, whether it is finance bill, all these documents that we have referred to must get Cabinet approval. My work is, my team here would prepare for me Cabinet memo, which I submit to the Cabinet, I defend. In fact, I have to present it, my Cabinet, first from the Cabinet subcommittee. They ask questions, yeah, which I must answer. I take it to the main Cabinet, chaired by the President, the Cabinet subcommittee, chaired by the Deputy President, the full Cabinet by the President. And you know, we have a President who understands almost everything. Yeah, so he will ask you questions, including even the budget line, some of the budget line. Is there money for fertilizer? Because that is his policy and the priority area. He will ask you the general overview. Is there money for fertilizer and agriculture? Yes. There's how much, this much, you move on and you finish. Once the Cabinet adopts, it becomes a government document. Now you cannot hear any Cabinet Secretary contradicting whether J.B. Muturi or anybody. He is supposed to support, because there is collective now responsibility. Yeah? There is supposed to be collective responsibility. Any issue I have with the Cabinet memo, I raise it at the Cabinet. Once it is adopted, it becomes a Cabinet decision. It is a collective responsibility.
Okay. So as we look to the next financial year, what estimates are we looking at in terms of our national budget, in figures? So then we speak about how then are we going to raise revenue to make sure that we meet our target in terms of budget allocations?
Thank you very much. So 2025, 2026. Yes. By the way, budget estimates, including even budget policy statements, carries with it medium term as well. So it is not just 2025, 2026. You will see 2025, 2026 and indicative figures for 26, 27 and 27, 28. Okay. You have to have three multi-year figures or data. But let me focus and concentrate only on 25, 26 because that is the year we are moving to. The budget policy statement, which was approved by Parliament, has a total expenditure projection of 4,263 billion. That's the total expenditure projection. Out of that, we project to finance it as follows. One is ordinary revenue of 2,835 billion. This has been revised downwards. Remember, in the previous financial year, when we projected this year, the 2025-26, we were looking at an amount of about 3,018 billion. But the reality has kicked in, and we are not seeing possibility of collecting. We want to be as realistic as possible. So that is the projected ordinary revenue. But there are also other non-tax revenues, or what, if you like, you can call ministerial A in A. We are also projecting to collect 550 billion. That is from 485 for this ending financial year. So 550 billion, 2,835. Then there is also 46 billion that is external grants that we expect. If you add those figures together, you'll realize that there is a budget deficit of 832 billion. This has come down from this year's 862 after supplementary 2. So 832 is actually 4.3% of the projected GDP. And that is coming down from this year's 4.9 of GDP. Now this we intend, or as at now, external financing or external borrowing that we have already negotiated and we feel is coming is 146 billion. So that leaves us with the remaining amount of 868 billion. That is likely to be 786 billion, which should be either financed through domestic borrowing. Actually, it is 684. The 684 can come from domestic borrowing, but it might not be the case because we are yet to negotiate with IMF. We are starting a program with them. We have not negotiated the number, so we didn't want to factor a number that has no basis. There are other negotiations ongoing. Any other external financing that will be available will go towards reducing the 684 billion projected domestic borrowing. This year, we are borrowing 582 billion domestic borrowing. We may go to 684 maximum, but that is likely to come down because we are likely to get some external financing. So we are just being cautious. We don't want to put money of a project, money that we have not negotiated. So that is how the budget is looking like. That is how it is likely to be spent. I want to point out that all these figures have come down. If you look at even the 4.2 trillion, it was initially 4.3 trillion, but we have toned it down because of economic realities. We don't want to overproject revenue, hence overprojecting expenditure.
Okay, so we are not going to see new taxes.
You see, new taxes may be there, but not taxes that would be harmful. You know, you could have taxes that are promoting business. You can have them there. What I don't expect to be there, and that I think we are very clear of as a ministry, is to reduce purchasing power of our citizens. Because I think Kenyans have complained that 2023, that they lost quite a bit, especially in direct taxation. Pay as you earn. There was some adjustments, especially for top earners, those who are earning beyond 500,000 per month, got their salary reduced because the tax rates increased from 30 to 32.5% and then 35% for those who are earning above 800. But everybody also had the housing levy, which used not to be there, brought into equation, and also the social health insurance fund levy. These two levies came in, and I think many Kenyans have been complaining about the pressure it has caused. And that is why in December we decided to give some relief by making them tax allowable. And that, to some extent, has saved Kenyans some money. I say it has saved Kenyans money because if that money was not taken to the levies, you would have earned it less of taxes. But now we are saying it is not taxable. So in a sense, if you are paying 100%, you are paying now 70%. That is the calculation. Okay. So to expect taxes, you will expect some tax adjustment, but not those which would reduce the purchasing power.
All right. That's a good point, Bwana CS. The question always is, why don't we just budget within our means? But I don't want you to answer that right now. Let's take a short break. Also listen to what Kenyans are saying. Our team went to the streets, engaged with the ordinary Kenyans on issues of budget processing. Let's listen to what the voices from the streets are talking about issues of budgeting.
Next coming budget, nilikuwa naomba serikali isaidie sana, iangazie wakulima. Country yote ndio ikue ni ukulima. Huwezi fanya kazi na njaa, country haiwezi endelea bila food. Achukue hiyo budget a basic sana kwa wakulima, kama vile Burundi wanafanya. Aekee wakulima vitu kama irrigation, mambo vile kama mbolea ikuwe ya kutosha, yani aangazie sana ukulima.
Agriculture and food security ndio itakuwa muhimu sana because hii watu wanapitia hard time kupata chakula.
Key thing kwa any economy, number one is health. So the number one, if they were to actually make an investment or invest in health, it is very unfair that common mwananchi akitaka kwenda in a public hospital kuna vifaa zenye anakosa.
Roads yes ina benefit sisi, lakini tunapata barabara ikijengwa sometimes imejengwa kwa hali mbaya yenye hawezi maliza hiyo miaka inafaa imalize.
Mambo ya afya, kuliside mambo ya agriculture na masomo sio sana, isipokuwa ni muhimu, but mainly ningeonelea kama watainvest sana na agriculture, because agriculture is the backbone of our economy.
Ana waweke pesa upande ya CTF. Hiyo inasaidia watoto sana. CTF inasaidia watoto. Pata ya kusema ati pesa wanaweka kwa mahospitali, na hospitali yenyewe ukienda huko tibiwi.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. Those are some of the views from the streets regarding budget process. We still have the CS of National Treasury, Mr. John Mbadi, who is together with us, with a team of directors from the National Treasury who are ready to answer to some of the questions that we are posing to them, but also those that have been raised from the streets. But before we get to the question from the streets, there is also the aspect of misuse of funds that are budgeted. We've always, in the recent past, seen people saying they are budgeted corruption.
Yeah.
Have you made sure that in this next budget, there is no budgeted corruption?
Yeah, I'll take that. My colleagues here will come in maybe in the next question, because I also don't want to monopolize the discussion. To deal with wastage of public funds, there are a lot of interventions, which some have been there, we are strengthening, some we are bringing in for the first time. Number one, corruption begins with budgeting process. It starts at the budgeting stage. That is why we are changing our budgeting from incremental budget to zero-based budget. I mentioned here earlier that the budget that we are compiling today, there is a tool in the IFMIS that we have put in there or onboarded to make sure that we even standardize prices. So that if you are budgeting to procure pens, the pens must have a standardized price. Not where a pen bought on the 4th floor is different from the price of a pen bought on the 1st floor, yet they are the same pen. Now, the other thing, so that is the zero-based budgeting, trying to sort out that. And the other thing is now to put up, because already we have to put up structures. So I've started with budgeting. Now you go to implementation of the budget. There is corruption also at the implementation. You must deal with that. So at the implementation, what do? We all know that a lot of wastage of public resources is at the point of procurement. Much as you'd have the most technical, knowledgeable, professional, and well-trained procurement personnel, if you allow human interaction with the procurement process, then definitely it will be compromised. And so we are trying to limit that by putting in a system, the e-procurement, to reduce that human interaction. So that is the next step at that implementation stage, and also to enhance supervision of our projects, yeah, and to make to bring in or leverage on technology to make sure that we manage the implementation well. Then finally is the oversight. So yes, you have budgeted, you have implemented. How then now do you oversight? Oversight, we have a number of oversight institutions. One of them, like the control of budgets, is actually in the role of the controller of budget, or her work is integrated in the implementation at the implementation stage. So you will find that any withdrawal from the consolidated fund must be with the authority of the controller of budget, who checks a lot of other things, compliance with the law, and many other things to make sure that expenditure is prudent, efficient, and effective. Then, now you have the Office of the Auditor General, who comes into audits. And the audit doesn't have to wait until the end of the financial year. They can do continuous audits, they can do special audit, they can do interim audit, many other audits. And then we have now Parliament as an oversighting institution, also with a responsibility. And finally, then now we have groups that deal with criminals. That is the ESCC, the DCI. Now then these ones kick in when we have misbehaved. Yeah, so they come in now to do what should be done best. And then you are taken to another body, the judiciary, which again now has a role to send very powerful warning. When people see a governor going into jail, then all the governors will realize that there is no impunity and that they are not above the law.
Okay.
So all this, if they work, the problem is sometimes our systems become dysfunctional. If all these systems, including the justice system, works efficiently, then you'd find corruption would be reduced to bare minimum.
All right. The question I wanted to ask before we move to the pending bills and the finance bill, those two aspects, then we will move to the PPP conversation, is the aspect of, if you look at SHA, as much as we are making contributions towards universal health provision or coverage, you find that we have almost 18 million Kenyans who've registered for this provision or for the new health insurance, but only 4 million Kenyans are paying towards that. Don't you think that that is a burden to the 4 million Kenyans who are paying for the 18 or give and take around 14 million Kenyans?
Yeah, this is a social health insurance scheme. And by the way, SHA has this health program has 3 components in it. There is the primary health care where the government has absolute responsibility. I think these are things that have not been explained to Kenyans very well. There is that primary health care where you feel I have headache, I don't know where it is coming from, you rush to the dispensary and you tell them I have headache, and they quickly assess you without even any machine. If you are lucky, you'll have your temperature measured, but they will just prescribe Panadol, and you know, if they don't tell you it is Panadol, anyway, let me not look down upon Panadol, it's very useful. But if they don't tell you what drug they're giving you, you just get fined and you go back home. So that primary health care is the work of government to finance 100%. Then there is a component of social health insurance. The social health insurance component is where we contribute. Those who are employed and even those who are not employed should contribute. So if you have 18 million Kenyans, the rate at which we are contributing should differ based on our income, but we should all contribute. Those who are earning more contribute more. Those who are earning less contribute less. I know any social health provision in the whole world is usually controversial. There are areas where this scheme has been implemented perfectly well. Like I'm told, it has been implemented in United Arab Emirates and Germany. It is working perfectly well. We need to send some of our officers to those countries to learn how to implement this, because this is a perfect program by the government. What we need to do is just to make implementation efficient. So that social health insurance scheme is where we now contribute based on our ability.
Okay.
And then those who, but the problem is if you are in the informal sector, it's usually very hard to enforce compliance. It is very difficult even at the taxation level. But we must strive to enforce it so that the 18 people, at least there is some contribution. May not be to the level where Mbadi is contributing, because I contribute about 27,000 shillings. And I am okay with that, because let me tell you, if that my money that I contribute can help save a life of someone who cannot afford medication, the better.
All right.
The last one, you know, you are the one, JB, who asked me about the
Yes,
So
yes,
let me just
yes.
say
Okay.
the last.
Okay, say the last.
The last
Yes.
is the chronic, critical, yeah, and emergency care. Emergency, chronic, and critical care. You know, the social health, as I said, it's an insurance. If you are not sick, and how many of us would want to fall sick to go to the hospital because I contributed money? If I can contribute money and remain healthy until 100 years plus, the better for me. So people should not say that I'm contributing and I'm not benefiting. Do you really want to benefit from health insurance? I don't want to benefit from health insurance. It remains an insurance for me, and that is it. Now, there are Kenyans who cannot afford and have chronic diseases, cancer and other chronic diseases, diabetes, very costly, and emergency. We are saying there is a fund created for them to take care of those critical illnesses because they are here with us. If we don't have government come in, there is going to be black tax. Kenyans who can, you will see adverts, you will see people appealing for public support, and it may not be forthcoming, and they die. And these are people who can live longer and still offer productively to our economy. So those are the three areas that the government has set its target and agenda to support.
Okay. There's the aspect of the finance bill, which I want you to speak to. If it is necessary for every fiscal year, then we have a new finance bill. But we'll tie that with the pending bills because we need to move to the next conversation. But before that, if there's any question from members of the public.
The explanation is really great, how consultative the process, the budgeting process is. But then the question I have in my mind is, how then do we end up with a country where some parts of the country clearly is behind, including on important things like infrastructure, like no roads in some part of the country. Other parts of the country have got great and beautiful roads. Then how consultative was the process that ended up with a country imbalanced like that? I would love to understand that. Then the delayed payments from service providers, government is the biggest spender. So the delayed payments from the service providers, I actually think makes the commodities become very expensive. A pen that is supposed to be bought 30 shillings, like the one I'm carrying, will cost government sometimes 100 shillings because the service provider knows I will be paid after 1 year, or I will be paid after 6 months, or God knows how long. So I have to really put in whatever time it is paid. So what is the Treasury doing to actually end this? Because this can actually reduce or increase the monies in the Treasury if we can actually buy this and pay almost immediately or in less than a month or a month. But if I know I am supplying the Treasury and they will pay after 6 months, I'm going to quote this thing 100 shillings or 150. So what are we doing to reduce that? Then the last one, this might be a little bit political, but don't worry. We rarely hear the pending, I am too. We rarely hear the pending bills from State House. We hear pending bills everywhere else. Do we have pending bills in State House? Thank you.
On pending bills, you asked where we are and
Yes.
what we are doing. I want to just mention that first, this has been a thorn in our flesh as a country and governments, and it has been piling over the years to the extent we reached a point where now we didn't even know how much as a country we owe to suppliers of goods and services to the government. And remember, government is the largest buyer of goods and services in an economy. Now, again, we had problems where people now don't have liquidity. People don't have money in their pockets. And worse still, there are non-performing loans in the banks and many other places. Some people take money from Shylocks, etc. Now, this has become a problem. So the government constituted a committee, put together a committee in place, which was gazetted by the Cabinet Secretary. And then this committee is concluding its work by end of this month. However, they have already produced a preliminary report. And in the preliminary report that has been produced, out of the bills that they received, in terms of value, 665 billion, thereabout. And I have the secretary of that committee here, he's looking at me. He's called Malombe. Out of that, they analyzed, by the time they gave the report, I think around January, they had analyzed about 474 billion shillings worth of bills. They are doing a very good job, by the way. Out of it, they approved or certified for payment about 206 billion. Now, we have now to come up with a strategy on how to settle these bills. However, I must report, fortunately, and I think that was also addressing a question that had been asked by Odede, what we are doing. You see, like in the road sector already, in the next 2 weeks or so, we will have settled bills of over 60 billion, about 70 billion, which is almost 50% of the pending bills at the road sector. We singled out road sector because we noticed from the numbers that the construction industry has been contracting. And this is because of the problems in the road sector. And again, if you move across the country, road projects are basically stalled. There are soils all over the roads and etc. And this is affecting and hampering economic progress. So already there is that process which is going on. What is being done now, the money is there. What is being done now is to negotiate interest payment as a component of the bills with the contractors. Some contractors are saying they're pushing back, we can only allow 70%. Some are saying, no, we want our interest accumulated over the years in full, but we are pushing for 50% reduction, that haircut. How much data goes into the planning and how updated is the data that I'll leave to my team here. Please, Musa and Anyona, you note that. How do we end up with a country of inequality? I really wanted to address that. First, this began from independence. When we came up with the sessional papers, 1965, and we categorically put as a government policy that we will only develop areas that appear to be contributing value to this economy. And we categorize some regions as of no value. I don't know how we, as a country, we could have made such a big mistake. That we are saying that because Northeastern looks dry, that it has no value. And yet we didn't know how much could be in the soil in those areas. And those Kenyans who are there are also Kenyans, and they contribute to our economic development. So that was the beginning. Secondly, we came up with very funny terminologies like siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. Yeah, that we decided that development or resources, public resources, government resources, taxpayers' money, where all of us contribute, will be distributed on the basis of how you smile with the government. That is the criteria. That we have no framework to allocate resources. So that took us so many. We came up with that also as allowable policy for so many years, and we were clapping, piga makofi, tunakapiga makofi for all those years, and no development in certain areas. Now, finally, we have just sophisticated. We probably, but even we have not sophisticated. You even heard as recently as 1 or 2 years ago, uncivilized people talking of shares, that people must have shares, the government. Yet we all have shares. We are all contributing to this, the growth of this economy. And then someone tells you, and very powerful in government, that you must have shares in government. And the shares, this person wants you to determine on the basis of votes counted for a specific candidate. And when it comes to taxes, We are not looking at the votes to charge taxes. We charge taxes to everyone. Those are some of the messes that we have found ourselves in. To the extent, I was recently in Tana River, and it is a very painful thing, very painful experience. You do not want to go through that. That you find that the children of the Orma community crossing River Turkana to go to school, thousands of them have been eaten by crocodile over the years since independence. For a bridge that can cost this country now, it was even cheaper then, 100 million shillings. Just 100 million shillings. And Anyona here had to put money in the supplementary budget for that bridge to be completed. The MP decided to put in 10 million, which is not even sufficient to do the bridge.
I think that's...
Yeah? The MP of Bura, he put 10 million. I told him, my friend, this one we have. You see adults, was this shedding tears that that bridge now is going to be done. We have just allocated the two bridges, which should cost 100 million each. We gave 50-50. We'll complete it in the main budget. Okay. Look at how insensitive we can be. And that is just one story among 1,000 of them. If you move across the country, you'll even get worse tales to tell.
I think that's a right point to end this conversation today, Bwana CS. To our live audience, applause. Thank you so much for paying attention and for your contributions into this discussion. And to our viewers back at home, it's an amazing opportunity that we've had to have CS and the directors from the National Treasury. At least for now, we have a better appreciation of the budget process. It doesn't just end with the famous briefcase in Parliament. This is a process that starts 9-10 months before we see the CS in Parliament. So now that we have that better appreciation, how comes as a country we still struggle with debts? That's the conversation we want to have next week with the CS and a team of directors, again, from the National Treasury. Our debt position as a country, as we speak, is at 11 trillion shillings, both domestic and external debts. Is this sustainable? That's the conversation. Tune in, continue to send in your feedback and comments on our SMS line 20316. Our WhatsApp line is 0786 316 316. Until next week, bye-bye for now.